Future Proof is sponsored by Learn Smart Academy, online revision courses for GCSE and A-Level. All your revision in one place, organised for you, interactive and game-changing. Hello and welcome to Future Proof. Thank you so much for joining me, Sarah Hopwood, as I continue this series covering how to do things, and it affects from practical things to how we think and also maybe how we process stuff. And through all my content, I will always cover emotionally intelligent thinking, and that's tied up with really recognizing and managing, understanding and using our emotions. And that format actually comes from Susan David. She's written an amazing book called Emotional Agility, but I'm sure for those of you familiar with emotional intelligence, you'll know about Daniel Goleman, and there are many others too. So do Google them. There is so much out there, and also people have written supporting material around the significance of, for example, habits, how creating good habits can really serve you by removing decision-making processes where you have to keep so disciplined. If you create a new habit, the habit will take care of that new discipline, but also how we have habits that really just don't serve us at all. And in today's session, and this will cover 2 programs, and today I'm covering how to beat the gremlins. And I will be talking later about how I co-presented with Sally Gunnell, the Olympic athlete who talks about gremlins herself. And if anything, and I don't know how she thinks now and whether I've got this right, but I think we both saw it in a slightly different way. And she would always talk about the gremlin in her head and identifying when she lost a race and at what point that was. And she said rarely was it ever on the finishing line. Where for me, I try and think of a gremlin that is removable. And I just love this idea of almost, and this ties up with mindfulness, of recognizing it, identifying it, calling it out, naming it, but also looking at it. In other words, imagining it out of you rather than in you. Because to me, if I can see a gremlin in my hand that I'm saying this is really affecting me at the moment, I love the fact if I can imagine it externally, because it means I can walk over and I can put it down somewhere, which means I can let go of it and I can get away from it. And another thing too with gremlins like that is if you can imagine it outside rather than actually inside of you, you can then get to a point where you can see a gremlin, if you like, making a noise somewhere, and then you can look at it, recognize it, call it out, name it, but you can choose not to pick it up. And that's what I like. And there are times when I see old habits or patterns of behaviour or see I told you so's going through my head. But because I'm able sometimes, I'm not saying I do it all the time, to imagine the gremlin externally, I can catch myself out. Great phrase that, catch yourself out. Get out the way of yourself. So I've seen it, recognised it, called it and named it, but I choose to leave it where it is. And that's quite empowering to then not get, if you like, entangled in it. But yes, it's psychology. There are different teachings around it. All I'm doing is just sharing my view of gremlins and the lessons that I've learned. And 9 times out of 10, I've learned the lessons from other people, from reading, from listening, and of course, crucially, through pain and crisis myself. And I'm not going to delve into my story, but I will just say right at the beginning, the reason why I got interested, if that's the right word, and I invested time in learning more about emotionally intelligent thinking, is that through crisis I hit rock bottom and I felt I couldn't go any further down, and I was completely and utterly broken. My whole life, if you like, had shattered like a glass vase or whatever in front of me, and I couldn't see a way forward. And all that I felt was that I needed to find new ways of thinking. And if you know anything about me, you know that I'm a person of faith, and that really, really strengthened and upheld me and guided me in all those things. But I don't want to talk about that now. I want to talk about the other learning that I did to try and beat my gremlins. I'm going to use a series of photos here of people that I've sort of interacted with, and I think it's worth saying that every single photo represents something that I just did on a voluntary basis, and none of it was paid work. And I think for me a fundamental way of starting to beat the gremlins, and this is purely through my lessons that I learnt myself, is through trying to find ways to serve, ways to help. And you know, it's not miserable, you have fun at the same time, so choose something that you're interested in. But you know, get yourself on a charity board of some sort, or do some voluntary work in education or with the youth, or you know, I've worked in prisons. I've done different things to try and serve, and I really hope that that inspires you, because when we take our mind off of ourselves, then that's a very good starting point, if you like, to deal with the gremlins. Otherwise they're all consuming and they just take over all your thinking. We become hypersensitive. We then start looking inward. We then, if we're not careful, don't like what we see and where we're at, so we start beating ourselves up and we start spiraling down in this awful, horrible place of almost self-destructions. And if you can imagine the gremlin being a person, the gremlin's there going, rock on, I've got you. And I look up and I think, you're not going to win, I'm going to win. And so find any storyline or game to try and get that energy back into your system, to just say enough is enough. I'm going to push back on this and I'm going to find ways. And that's what I did. And that's for me why I invested in learning more about emotional intelligence, what it was, tangible. I needed it to be tangible so I could touch it and feel it, and then how I could make it work for me. So here is a lovely, lovely photo of fellow singers who sang on the River Thames for the Queen's Jubilee, and all of us came from all over the UK, but no matter who we are, we all have gremlins. What has also inspired me are people who some deem to be successful, and I'm not giving a definition on success. I actually think we all have our own versions of success, and what some might think is successful. So these pictures might well say, well, money. I don't believe, for me, money isn't success to me. That's not my currency. So success is around what your currency is. And, you know, without sounding too soft, my currency is love and acceptance, unconditional love and acceptance. And so I have a different currency, but a lot of the time the world will look at these pictures and say, these are successful people. But what I want to do is maybe think, how do these people think? How have they won? You know, is it that they've always been lucky? Is it that, you know, whenever it was a 50-50 swing as to what, I don't know if you've ever noticed when you pull a Christmas cracker, every single time I pull a cracker, and I'm not exaggerating here, my family would be roaring with laughter now and saying this is true. But for about the last 20 years, every single time I pull a cracker, I never ever get the bit with the content in it. And, you know, so is it luck? Is it fate? Is it those things? Or indeed, is it a question to say, how have these people dealt with their gremlins, and how have they turned those tactics, if you like, of dealing with the gremlins, how have they turned them round so that they can work for them? But also it could be, What gremlins are they navigating themselves now that the world has no idea that it's going on? You've got a supposed picture of success here, but is it really? What gremlins are these people dealing with? And just going into the break, I just want to say on the back of that, we should all be very, very careful about how we interact with other people around us. And I think we need to be kind to ourselves and kind to other people. Because, you know, you only have to look at the pop and the so-called famous world to see there are many, many people out there dealing with gremlins, and the world knows nothing about it. So I think the lesson that I learned is, you know, be gentle with yourself, be gentle with other people, because we actually have no idea whatsoever as to what those people are going through. And before, I've talked about a story when my brother died and I had to go and pick the kids up from school, and my foot slipped on a clutch and the car jerked backwards as I was reversing into a space, and a parent was behind, and the parent went berserk, and the parent wasn't hurt. I was clearly sorry. I could see her in the rear view mirror. All I kept doing was saying, I'm sorry. So she came round and bashed on the window. So I wound it down, and I could have done two things. I say sorry again, or tell her my brother had died. And I just looked and I pleaded with her, and I just said, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to do it. And she would not let up. She just kept hammering and hammering at me. And I had literally, my brother had died an hour earlier at the age of 33. She had no idea, I know, but we must be gentle with each other because we all have gremlins. Stay with me and I'll come back after the break.